back for our NFHS Legends of Officiating interviews, and today we are here with Kathy Krebs, who, if you are in the world of interscholastic gymnastics, you are not a stranger to her name. Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dana, for allowing me to share my thoughts.
We're looking forward to it. So we'll be asking you a series of questions and may throw in some wild cards at you, but we'll get rolling, and then we'll be sharing this, of course, with officials across the country in all sports. So we look forward to it. Our first question for you is, what role did interscholastic sports play in your life growing up?
Well, that's an interesting question because I grew up when there was no interscholastic competition. I was actually a swimmer on a synchronized swim team in my high school. And then I had to not really drop out of swimming, but change to another sport because our high school said you could stay in one sport for 2 years, but then you had to diversify to another sport. So I picked gymnastics. I'd never had any lessons. Never did gymnastics before in my life, but I had a couple of really unique PE teachers, and I was a fairly quick learner, which kind of surprised me, and I'm sure surprised her. But there was no competition. We had intra-school competition, and I still have the little plaque that I received my senior year for second place on the uneven bars. But so that's a very limited spectrum. But in elementary school, I did track. We would have track and field in intra-district meet in track and field, which was all the elementary schools that belonged to that District 144. But there wasn't any interscholastic sports at that time.
So you just set me up for the next question. Please explain to me the significance of Title IX to you.
Oh my goodness. Well, when I was in high school, of course, the classes were separate. I mean, the genders, boys and boys classes, girls and girls classes. I went through college and went to Illinois State, majored in PE and minored in psychology, and couldn't wait to get started in my new career of teaching. But there were no there was no gender mixing when I started teaching. And I just found there was a lack of enthusiasm. I don't know why, but you know, the female gender sometimes isn't always wanting to exercise or move or participate in things, excluding those people that are very competitive. And I had, when Title IX came along, I had a co-ed archery class that came up, and it was like it invigorated everybody in the class, the girls, the boys. The boys were challenging the girls to do things better. The girls were challenging the boys to be less competitive and more accepting, and I want to say nurturing. I don't know if guys are nurturing, but you know, wanting girls to do better. And so it was, I think, one of the greatest things since sliced bread for me, because it opened a whole new avenue and venue of teaching classes and having kids respect each other for what they can do, help each other. It just was, it's been a great thing. Not only was it great in our classes, but it also opened the door for interscholastic competition. And that took a while to evolve because states did not immediately, it wasn't that they didn't endorse, but I think they just didn't know how to go about implementing state meets in specific sports. Girls gymnastics in the state of Illinois was not implemented right away. Volleyball, track and field, and I believe basketball came along first. And, for obvious reasons, what do you do with this sport? It's very complicated. How do you host a big meet? How do you filter kids from their local competitions up to a state meet when you might have team activities or team score, I should say. But yeah, it was a complicated thing to do, but it all worked out in the end. And I was very privileged to be part of the committee that set up the first state series in Illinois.
That is fantastic. What a wonderful answer to hear from somebody who was right in the thick of it. And now, of course, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the passage of Title IX this year. And I know for someone like you who was there as you kind of saw it evolve, that's a fantastic story to tell. So I really appreciate your perspective on that. So what made you decide along the line to become a gymnastics judge?
I didn't have a choice. I competed in college, and in my junior year, my coach, there was a big shortage of gymnastics judges in the whole country. But my coach came to practice one day, and I had a teammate who were still very good friends, and she handed each of us a rule book and said, start studying, you're going to start being a judge. You will come to my house, and this is exactly how she put it. You'll come to my house next Friday afternoon, and I'll try to go over some of the basics with you. And we're like, well, we were both very busy. I had a 24-hour minor and a 36-hour major, plus everything else that was going on. And I thought, how are we going to fit this in? And we belonged to a honorary gymnastics fraternity that, performed as a co-ed group throughout the state. So we did what she said, because she didn't have a great knowledge of gymnastics, but she was a great motivator. And I wish I knew where she was now, so she could finally see that her two gymnasts out of all of them did make it in life, that we were kind of goofy as college students, but we had fun with her and we taught her a lot. And anyway, so I'll continue the story because it is kind of interesting. So the next day we had a competition at Illinois State in Normal. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I wonder who the other judges are going to be besides my friend Scylla and I. And so in walks some ladies. I did not really have an idea who they were, except for one of them was my high school coach, or PE teacher, I should say. And so I knew her and I was like, oh my gosh, Sharon Perkle, I haven't seen her for a long time. So there were 4 judges per event. There were 2 juniors from University of Illinois, because our meet was against University of Illinois. And they came along, and their coach had recruited them also, that they were going to be brand new judges. So there were, I believe, 3 new people and 1 experienced person that were our judging panel. My experienced judge was Erna Wattel from Hungary. She was the Olympic coach way back in the 50s, and the US Olympic coach, by the way, because she immigrated to the United States. One of the other panels, chief judge, was Jackie Fye, who was an Olympian. And of course, these ladies are now in a different era in their life. They're not just coming off of competition. And so we got a chance to learn from these 2 ladies in one meet. So what we did was we arrived at the prescribed time. We sat down in our chairs. We judged there were levels. in collegiate gymnastics at that time. We judged the lower level. When that part of the meet was over, we went down to the locker room and changed into our leotards. And then those experienced judges combined into a single panel. And then the higher level competed, and those judges just went from one event to another event. And I will say it was an amazing experience, but an experience where all of a sudden, I'm a junior in college, all of a sudden I'm getting phone calls. Can you come judge? I mean, like virtually the very next week. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? So I remember my friend and I drove to Peoria for some meet over there. And then all of a sudden, Western Illinois was calling, can you come? University of Illinois, Chicago, can you come? And so that's how I got started. It was like, I didn't feel like I could say no. It wasn't for the money. It was because, I hate to say it, I had a talent. You had a talent, and I was a teacher, or training to be a teacher. And that's part of it, sharing your talent and your knowledge to help other people get better at whatever they're doing. So it snowballed, and it became to a point where I almost had to turn down a few things, because as time went along in my career, I was a high school teacher, high school coach, judged high school, judged club. So I was coaching all week, plus judging some nights. Saturdays, I would go, if we had a meet, of course we were in a meet, but otherwise, Saturdays I would do collegiate judging, and Sundays was club. So that meant no days whatsoever. That didn't exactly sit real well with family, so at a certain point I had to draw a line for a little while until I completed my career in education. But it was, I guess I would say I fell into it. And because I love the sport, I love human movement and watching what people can do to create artistic things that sort of draw you in. I'm still here looking at it and loving it.
That's an amazing story. And it's funny because as I've done these interviews, I've noticed that many people kind of got voluntold it was you're going to officiate. It wasn't really a choice. Choice is made for you, but it's amazing how long that has been a part of your life. And really along those lines, so we know how you got your start now, but when did you realize that judging gymnastics was really something that you wanted to do for the rest of your life?
I don't think I ever thought about it as being something I wanted to do the rest of my life. It was, the old saying goes, if you get the gymnastics bug, it's in your blood, and it's part of you. And I used to work at a gymnastics camp, and then I met people all across the country. Many of them were in college training for their college competitions. And so it was just a matter of year after year, you share your information, you learn from other people. And, it was, like I said in the beginning, it wasn't necessarily that I knew I was going to do this forever. It was more like, well, I don't know when there is the end game, except in this sport, the end game is when you can't do it in your head anymore. It's not a matter of running up and down a court or being physically fit. It's a matter with, can you move your hand fast enough, calculate fast enough, and be accurate?
What's the most memorable moment of your judging career during a competition?
That's a hard one to answer, because every competition has something unique, whether it's good or whether it's bad. I guess one of the most enjoyable parts of being a judge was the very first state meet. We had a very personable state all-around champion named Lori Erickson. And she had a following of other high school kids that was pretty amazing. She just had a charisma about her that brought others in. And she came up to the gymnastics camp where I was working, and I got to know her a little better. I knew her when she was a freshman all the way through when she was a senior. And so for me, I judged the prelims of that meet, got to judge her, but I was the color commentator for the finals. And I worked with a guy named Rick Talley from WGN television. Never did anything on television before in my life. Didn't really know how to do an interview, but Lori was such an easygoing senior that it was easy to have a conversation with her on live TV, by the way, because it was right then and there, nothing recorded. And we had a great conversation, and I kept getting let's pull this together to the end. We got to go to a commercial. But I think there's been so many great experiences as far as watching kids. And because I do both club and high school, they bring a uniqueness, not only by body type, but by their interpretation of what they're trying to present to me as an official. And so it's fun to watch the younger kids, because some of them are trying to be very sophisticated and do things to very sophisticated music, like a ballet or whatever. And then you get to the high school side of it. And of course, those kids don't want to do anything ballet-ish. They want to show you how they can rock and roll, So at any rate, all levels bring something to the table for me. And I think the Lori Erickson story is the only one I could think of that was the most unique, because it was the start of high school gymnastics in Illinois.
That's a great memory and a great story. So speaking of the memorable experiences, what is the most memorable experience of your judging career outside of competition?
Outside of competition. Oh, well, there have been many, many, many. I think one of the biggest highlights, I don't know if you remember Nadia Comaneci, the Romanian gymnast. And I used to write a small article for a magazine called The Gymnast Magazine. And it had been in existence since the 60s. And every state had a reporter. And so I was the reporter for Illinois, and I got to interview Nadia Comaneci. I was the first American who got to interview her. And I'm not a reporter, I'm not a journalist, but I had to figure out some questions. So kind of an interesting story. She came to Evanston High School in Illinois, and she was on tour. And the Romanian, not village, but there's a community of Romanians in the city of Chicago. And the head of the Romanian church in Chicago happened to know my dad and told my dad about, they were going to have Nadia for a dinner. And so one day after the competition or the exhibition, they went to this Romanian church, and we had dinner. And after dinner, I was escorted to a little spot along with every high-ranking USA gymnastics dignitary, because she had not granted interviews to anybody, nor would the Russian Secret Service, or I should say Romanian Secret Service, allow her. So there were guys in trench coats, and I'm not exaggerating. They were in trench coats surrounding her, guarding her. And I thought, well, let's ask her questions not related to gymnastics. And she had just been to Disney World. So I asked questions about her time at Disney World. And unfortunately, I didn't ask them in the way that led to more than a yes or no answer. So I got basic yes and no answers, but I still have a little, I don't know what you would call it, a little reel-to-reel recording of that. And I wrote an article that was featured, and I believe somebody taped it off a TV. So I got the actual tape of me interviewing her. I don't even think I have anything to play it on anymore. But I think there were so many different things, but that has to be probably the highlight because, as you know, she was in the 1976 Olympics and the first woman to ever score a 10.0. And she was amazing. I got to go to a workout where she was working out. She was an amazing worker, and her coach, Bella Caroli, just knew how to handle her perfectly to get the most out of her. So, like I said, there have been many more, but maybe I'll pick that one as my highlight.
That is one of the coolest stories I've ever heard. That is so, growing up, I remember Nadia. I mean, everybody knew who Nadia was, even if you weren't a gymnastics fan. If you watched the Olympics, or if you liked sports, you knew who Nadia was. And the fact that you actually met and interviewed her, I'm not gonna lie, I got a little goosebumps as you were telling the story. What an amazing experience. I can see why you picked that one for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I have to add one little thing to that. I was the summer, well, the Olympics were in, I believe, August that year, and I worked at a camp, and I had brought my portable TV to camp, and it was in the coach's cabin, so we could, watch TV when we wanted. But every kid at camp had heard about Nadia Comaneci. We had, I don't know, 120 kids, boys and girls. So, and we had no TV. So I lugged my TV to the lodge, and we crammed every kid in the lodge and watched her performances. And so, I mean, it was like, what did this girl just do? It was pretty amazing. But I think besides Olga Corbett and Kathy Rigby, Nadia was the next big deal in the country, in our country at least. And there's more to her story. I happen to know a little bit about her defection from Romania, but yeah, she's married to Bart Connor, who was an Illinois male gymnast, and they have one child, and they live in Oklahoma. And she's been a great asset to our gymnastics community.
I love that. Wow. I'm just I'm a little in awe right now. That's just, I mean, because you think about it, and when you think about great gymnasts,
Yeah.
Nadia, Mary Lou, everybody just they're so great that you don't even need their last name. It's just, who they are. Everybody remembers them. I did not know she was married to Bart Connor, but I remember him as a gymnast. I had no idea.
Yeah, they met, there was a tour in the United States, and he met her, and they kind of got along, but when the story about the defection is, she was doing a tour in New York City, and a couple of friends and mine happened to be talking with Bella on the QT, so to speak, not so that the Romanian police knew what was going on. And actually, Bella had talked with Nadia, we're leaving and we want you to come with us. But Nadia wanted to go back because, of course, her family, and she was a child yet. So Bella and Marta just walked out of the hotel and got in a waiting car, and off they went. Nadia went back to Romania. I'm giving you the shortened version. And as the story goes, the dictator there, Ceausescu, was very cruel, and they were used as humans, to promote the Romanian political scene. And so she dressed as a boy and walked out of Romania through the mountains and presented herself to a free country. And then she knew she wanted to come to the US. She came to the US, and I don't know all of the rest of the story about, I probably do, but I just can't recall it right now, how Bart ended up, the two of them. But they had a great wedding, one here in the US, and they went to Romania, and she is an idol in Romania. And they had a huge, huge wedding in Romania.
That is so cool. Man, I learned something new every day, and that was definitely something I did not know. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
How important, and we're going to shift gears a little bit, how important is it to have mentors as a judge, and what words of wisdom do you have for individuals who serve in the role of a mentor?
Well, I didn't have a mentor. When you get kind of drafted into the chair, so to speak, all I could do was to learn as much as I could from those two chief judges, because after that, like I said, I was getting phone call after phone call, can I come and judge? And then I knew I better study a little bit, know the rule book so that I knew what I was doing. So it wasn't like I knew what a mentor was, because I didn't. Those chief judges went on to they were doing higher level competitions in the United States. And this is at the time when the US was trying to become independent and actually field a competitive team of women's gymnastics to show up on the international scene. And that's a whole different story about AAU and USA Gymnastics that we won't go into. But to answer the second part of that question about how important is it, I think it's pretty important, because at least I had a couple of friends to call on the phone. What do you do about this? Or I saw that. How should I have looked at that? But the one thing about the sport of gymnastics, we have a lot of seminars, clinics, symposiums, whatever you want to call it. I feel like I am constantly doing continuing education. So even though I may not have grown with a mentor, I had to learn from presenters, whether they were coaches or other judges with international experience. Now, it's very important for new officials to have a mentor so they can call you and say, I'm frustrated. In certain sports, I hear, they're getting booed and chased to their cars and things like that. And I'm like, well, I got booed once in gymnastics. And I was like, what? You didn't like my score? Oh, well, so, I was already an experienced official, so it didn't bother me. I just sort of laughed. Like, you people don't know what you're booing about just because you didn't like the score. But, I was an athletic director, and I was in many basketball games on the sidelines watching crowds go crazy, at the officials, and hoping that you could get the officials into the locker room fast enough at the end of the game. That was just one sport. I mean, football and everything else. But it's important, because young officials aren't going to stick with it. There's not a lot of money involved. They're of a different era. I'm from an era where expectations where you did things outside of your main occupation, and most of the time you didn't get paid, and you just accepted that because pay was low on a lot of things. I thought, I don't even remember what I got, $25, $30 for all day. I thought that was pretty good. Now I would like, that's just a 1 hour session, not in high school, but in club. So in order to keep officials, they need mentors and they need affirmation that what they're doing is okay and correct, and you're going to make mistakes. There's no doubt about it. You just keep moving on, read your rule book, go to a clinic, go past the mistake. If things become violent, then you just don't go back to that particular place, is one way to resolve that. But yeah, mentors are very, very, very important. In our sport, it's very hard to find people. And I'll say this, it's not a sport that you can sit at the kitchen table and learn and become an official, because you don't understand the technique involved in what you're seeing and how to deduct. I don't know if I could become a basketball official, but I think I could learn, those rules fairly easily and run up and down the floor. Yeah, palming, things like that, or lifting on volleyball, soccer, stick your hand out, ball goes that way, this way. But gymnastics is just so many teeny tiny deductions. I'd say there are thousands of ways to look at something. So I don't know how we can do a better job, but in every sport, and in particular gymnastics, I know people can ask for mentors, but somehow we all have to figure out how we can help that new official stay in the sport, because they come in and then they go. It's not worth it. Not worth to drive in a snowstorm, not worth to be chased off the field. It's a little bit different time in our country and in society.
You are 100% on target with that. And I think as I was listening to you speak, I was thinking about gymnastics, diving, some of those sports where there's such highly technical aspects that you can't be just a casual fan. Oh, I watch the Olympics every 4 years. I'm clearly qualified to be a gymnastics judge. It's not that kind of a sport, because it is so technical and so difficult. In basketball, a shot is worth 1, 2, or 3, depending on what the situation is. It's not the same. Like those kinds of rules don't translate into gymnastics. So it is such a specialized sport that it does make that recruitment difficult, but also makes the mentoring difficult as well. So that's something that I don't think we always think about, those idiosyncrasies of different sports. We'll talk about, like in wrestling, you have to have been a wrestler to really understand the sport. I think gymnastics is probably much the same in that regard, where unless you've been kind of in it, it's not one that you could, like you said, you can't sit and read the gymnastics rule book and go, okay, I'm ready, because that's just not the case.
Yeah. And most of the time in the sport of gymnastics, at least in Illinois, you judge all levels, all in the same meet, not like you're a B team basketball official where you can learn and make mistakes and then you move up to A, and then, then you might get a JV and then a sophomore, whatever. In gymnastics, you sit down and you judge. In most states, it's called JV or sophomore. Maybe you might have a freshman meet. And then right after that, here come the varsity kids. And in many states, like in Illinois, you judge by yourself. So that is really tough to get people comfortable with that situation. The only time you judge with someone else is maybe at a big invitational conference meet, the state series, things like that. So it's hard, to become an official in this sport.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
So throughout your career, what was a failure that you had as a gymnastics judge that you look back at and you realize that it really helped you in the long term?
Well, I think I said this earlier, you make a lot of mistakes, you don't intend to They're half tenths, whole tenths, multiple tenths, up to tenths, special requirements. There's such a ball of wax of things. And I guess I can't pinpoint one particular failure, but for me, if I make a mistake and it's within the time period allotted to correct it, I try to correct and call the coach over to say, I made a mistake and I need to fix this. And this is how it's going to be fixed. And I feel like it's beneficial for the coach because they then understand what you did wrong. It's beneficial for yourself because you become aware of what you missed. And of course, the kid, they're out there trying to do their best, and their parents are in the stands, and it's respectful to fix a mistake and not let it stay as a mistake. So the short answer on this is I can make mistakes all the time. Sometimes I don't know. Many times a coach might point it out, or I just go, oh God, I forgot that. I got to go back and fix it. Not one thing like I missed a basket or something like that. It's just little teeny mistakes that you need to get past, not let it sink you as far as you're thinking of, oh, I'm a terrible official, I should quit.
It's hitting that reset button. It's okay to make the mistake, and you'll probably not make that same mistake again. So that's always the lesson to be learned. What is the aspect of judging that you find the most rewarding?
Well, it can be any level of gymnast, whether it's the elementary kids at the club level or the high school kids. I don't judge collegiate anymore. I like to watch it. It's a different animal. But I was a physical education teacher, and I love watching human movement. I love watching track people run, to watch their technique, watch the human body. It's hard to explain, but what kids do in the sport, especially on floor exercise, to interpret music and to present you with a package of, this is my interpretation, this is my tumbling, this is my dance. How'd you like it? And so I think that for me is, I'll never forget this one gymnast, and she was, I'd probably say 6th or 7th grade, and she did a routine to Mozart. And it was very, very simple. She didn't have anything complicated in it, but I got drawn into what I was watching, and I was almost having a hard time concentrating on my paper because what she was doing was so aesthetically pleasing to me that it was the embodiment of what I wanted to see in the sport. And so I think that is, for me, it can be every meet, or it could be, who knows what meet, you might find that. But every kid that presents themselves to me as a judge presents with enthusiasm most of the time, and a sincere desire to do their very best for me. And I acknowledge that by giving her the signal to begin and giving her a nod and a smile at the end to say, all right, you did that, and we'll see what I come up with a score.
That was probably, of all the interviews I've done, that was one of the most unique answers. And I think that when you think about gymnastics, there is that artistry involved that may not be the case in some other sports. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about going to a dance performance and how you get you just kind of get drawn in and almost transfixed by what's going on the dance floor. And I could see where that would be similar to gymnastics, because there is that performance element, there is the artistry, but it's still sheer athleticism and all of that. So I think that's a really cool answer, and I appreciate I appreciate hearing that, because I haven't heard a similar answer with our other sports. So that was fantastic. With regard to officiating, if you could tell your younger self to do something differently, what would that be, if anything?
Well, like I said in the very beginning of my officiating, I judged for 2 years while I was in college. I don't even know how I managed to do that and everything else that you were expected to do. And your last 2 years of college, I'm sure you remember, are very intense. You really start getting into your academics and so on. But I think I just let things get, I won't say out of hand, but I was working so much that I'm not sure I was doing justice to anything in particular. And so there was a time in there, my profession was teaching, but I also did club judging, and I had to step aside for a little while from that to give my bread and butter, my teaching and coaching, the opportunity to flourish for that time. And then when I had a good friend who, while I was still working, said, please come to the club and judge these kids. They're just little ones. They just want to see a friendly face. You don't need to know anything. Just figure out something and give them a score. And so I was like, hearing the music, watching the kids, looking at the smiles. And I was like, oh man, I really missed that, And so back I came to doing everything high school and club. And it's just, there's certain things, I'm sure every official has something, but hearing music in the background or hearing the cheers for something that's going on in another event, it just kind of keeps you wanting to be in it more and more and see different things. So as far as my younger self, I kind of regret having to step aside from the club judging, because that's really where I learn a lot of technical information that I can pass on in the high school world. But it was a matter of survival. And there wasn't anything else. That's the one thing that I kind of regret. I had to step away for a while. But, as the saying goes, there's only so much of you to go around. And so I'm back with it now, and it's all worked out.
Yeah, there just aren't enough hours in the day sometimes, or we haven't figured out cloning yet. So it does make it a little bit impossible at times to do everything that we have on our plates. And that juggling act is always difficult with regard to the stuff you have to do, the stuff you love doing.
Exactly.
Definitely is a challenge. I think we've all struggled there. That prioritization is difficult. So I have a final question for you, and this is also something that'll help the National Federation in our quest. You have one opportunity to convince people to become officials, and this could really be officials of any sport. What do you tell them?
The standard answer from a lot of people is to give back. But I think my standard answer is provide an opportunity for young people growing up to do something positive with their life. Yes, they're going to prepare for a career through their academics, but providing an opportunity in athletics by being an official helps them to branch their soul out into other avenues that they may not know now that they will, tap into later on. Many people, I've heard the saying that employers like hiring people who have been on a competitive team, because they know they're going to get the best out of that individual, and that individual will work really hard until they get what their goal is, until they can achieve that goal. So my thing is, you need to provide the opportunity. We all do, no matter what your profession is. You need to provide an opportunity for younger people, and especially high school people. They thrive on getting responsibility, receiving instructions and carrying them out, showing you what they can do, but they don't get that opportunity if you don't give it to them. And because most officials have a talent, and the talent is officiating and understanding, you're working for, especially on the interscholastic level, youngsters, you're not working with pros, you're not working with college kids, you're working with a developmental age. And if you don't give them that opportunity, who's going to be a leader down the road in anything we do, in politics, in sport, in education? So that's my advice, is to provide the opportunity. If you have the talent, share it, provide the opportunities for someone else to develop their talent.
Kathy Krebs, our legend of gymnastics. This was an absolute honor and pleasure to be able to sit. I could probably talk to you for another 3 to 7 days. So your wealth of knowledge and your willingness to share that with us is absolutely appreciated. This will go out to all of our officials in all sports across the country. So on behalf of the National Federation and all of the officials, we thank you for your time and for your willingness to really pay it forward to that next generation of officials. Kathy Krebs, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Dana. Appreciate visiting with you.
It was wonderful. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.